Emily, a 28-year-old woman, had just experienced the most painful breakup of her life. After 5 years of a seemingly perfect relationship, her world had crumbled. She felt as though everything she had known was suddenly slipping through her fingers. Alone in her apartment, she sat in silence, overwhelmed by a flood of emotions, betrayal, confusion, and an aching emptiness that refused to go away. It was late afternoon when the rain began to pour outside, tapping against the windows with a rhythm that seemed to mirror the heaviness in her heart. The sound of the raindrops hitting the glass felt like the only thing keeping her grounded in a world that suddenly felt foreign. With a sigh, Emily wiped away the tears that had begun to blur her vision, wondering how her life had taken such a turn. She had tried to hold on to hope, but now with him gone, she didn't know where to turn. The weight of the silence around her was suffocating. She was left with only memories, and they stung more than she ever imagined. After what felt like hours of sitting in the quiet darkness, Emily felt a strange restlessness take over. The walls of her apartment, once a comforting space, now seemed to close in on her. The silence was deafening, and her thoughts were spinning in endless circles. It wasn't healthy to stay locked inside, wallowing in sadness. So she decided to get out. The rain, which had started to pour harder, was no longer a deterrent. Instead, it felt like the perfect excuse to step outside and let the world wash over her. Without much thought, Emily grabbed her jacket and stepped out into the cool, wet air. The city was quieter than usual, with most people seeking shelter from the downpour. She didn't have a specific destination in mind. She just needed to move to feel something other than the sting of loss. The sound of her boots splashing in puddles echoed in the empty streets as she walked aimlessly. It wasn't about finding answers. It was about putting one foot in front of the other, letting the rhythm of her steps become a distraction from the aching void inside her. As she wandered down the familiar streets, everything around her seemed distant, as if she were walking through a dream. The rain had a cleansing effect on her mind, and for the first time in hours she allowed herself to breathe. But even in the solitude of the rain, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. As Emily walked deeper into the rain-soaked streets, her mind began to wander back to the time when everything had felt right. She thought of the countless memories she had built with him, the quiet evenings spent cooking dinner together, the spontaneous road trips, the long talks that lasted into the early morning hours. At one point, she had believed that they were destined to grow old together, that the bond they shared was unbreakable. But now, all of it felt like a cruel joke. She couldn't pinpoint exactly when things had begun to unravel, but the cracks had been there, invisible at first, until they widened into something undeniable. The arguments had started small over trivial things, but over time they grew more frequent, more intense. The silence between them had stretched for days at a time. The love she once felt had begun to feel like a distant memory, replaced by the heavy weight of confusion and resentment. Emily didn't know where she went wrong. Was it her fault? Had she been too demanding, too selfish? She replayed every conversation, every moment, trying to find the turning point. But all she could hear were the echoes of words that had been said in anger. She couldn't even remember the last time they'd laughed together or held hands without a sense of distance between them. The rain seemed to wash away her tears, but not the ache inside her chest. She couldn't stop asking herself what went wrong. She had given so much of herself to the relationship, convinced that love alone could fix everything. But now, all that was left were the remnants of what had once been a dream, scattered across the past like broken glass. She didn't know how to move forward. How could she possibly rebuild herself after this? What was left of her after everything had crumbled? As Emily continued walking lost in her thoughts, she barely noticed the darkened streets around her. The rain had become heavier, and the world seemed to blur in a haze of droplets. The usual hum of the city was muffled by the storm, leaving her feeling even more isolated. She was so absorbed in her own confusion that she hardly registered the small, crumpled object lying on the sidewalk until she almost stepped on it. Stopping abruptly, Emily glanced down. A black wallet lay, discarded, half submerged in a puddle, its edges soaked from the rain. Something about it seemed out of place, as though it had appeared there just for her. She hesitated, unsure whether to pick it up. Her first instinct was to leave it there to avoid getting involved with something that wasn't hers. But as she stood there staring at the wallet, she felt an odd pull, a sense of curiosity that she couldn't shake. She crouched down slowly and reached for it, her fingers brushing the cold, damp leather. It was heavier than she expected, and when she opened it, her eyes quickly scanned the contents. There was cash, several credit cards, and a few receipts. Nothing particularly out of the ordinary. But then, tucked inside one of the card slots, she spotted something that caught her attention. A small, folded piece of paper. Her heart skipped a beat. Something about this felt significant, as if fate had nudged her to find this wallet. She unfolded the paper carefully, wondering what could be so important that someone had hidden it away. The words written inside weren't just a name or a phone number. They were something more, something that sent a jolt of recognition through her. At that moment, Emily's mind raced, and a wave of tension washed over her. She didn't know why, but she felt as though she had stumbled upon something that was about to change everything. Emily sat down on the edge of the sidewalk, the rain pouring down around her, but it barely registered now. The wallet was in her hands, its contents laid out in front of her. The weight of the moment hung in the air, and she felt the strange compulsion to keep going to find out what was inside. As she carefully sifted through the cash and credit cards, her fingers brushed over an old receipt, a dry cleaning tag, and then, just beneath them, a small folded piece of paper. It wasn't much larger than a business card, but it felt significant in her hands. She unfolded the paper slowly, almost reverently, as if she feared disturbing something fragile. The words written on it were hurried, as if the writer had been racing against time. Emily squinted to read the faded ink. "Don't be afraid to let go of the past. You are not defined by your mistakes. There is more to you than you know." The words struck her like a thunderclap reverberating through her chest. She had been so consumed by her own pain, her own sense of failure, that she hadn't even thought about forgiveness of herself or anyone else. The message was oddly comforting, like a stranger had reached out to tell her that it was okay to let go. But what made it even more unsettling was the fact that this paper was hidden in a wallet she had just found on the sidewalk. It felt too personal, too intentional. The more she thought about it, the more the discovery felt like some kind of sign. She turned the paper over, hoping there was more, but it was just blank. Her mind raced as she considered the possibility that the person who owned this wallet had left it behind on purpose, that this message was meant for someone like her, someone lost, someone looking for answers. Could this have been meant for her? Emily's fingers trembled as she put the paper back into the wallet, trying to make sense of the strange turn of events. She looked around, but the street was still empty. There was no sign of anyone who might be looking for it, no one calling out in distress. She was alone, and the discovery felt even more like a coincidence or perhaps fate, drawing her attention to something she desperately needed to hear. As she stood up and started to walk again, the weight of the wallet in her hand felt different. It wasn't just an object anymore. It was a symbol, a catalyst. Emily's heart pounded as she realized she had just stumbled upon something that was changing the way she saw everything, even her own future. As Emily continued walking through the rain-soaked streets, the weight of the wallet in her hand seemed to pull her thoughts in a new direction. The message on the piece of paper had hit her harder than she expected. The more she thought about it, the more she realized just how much it resonated with her. "Don't be afraid to let go of the past," she repeated to herself quietly, the words echoing in her mind. It was as if someone had seen right through her pain, understood the heartbreak that had been weighing her down for months, and had given her permission to release it. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emily stopped focusing on the breakup, the anger and the self-doubt that had plagued her. She let the words wash over her like the rain, slowly dissolving the bitterness that had built up inside. It wasn't that the pain disappeared immediately. It was still there, buried deep within, but something inside her had shifted. She no longer felt as trapped by her grief, as though she were drowning in it. Instead, she began to realize that her future didn't have to be defined by this moment, by the mistakes of the past, or by the relationship that had ended. The idea that she wasn't defined by her mistakes struck a chord deep within her. Emily had always been a perfectionist, believing that she had to have everything figured out, that every relationship, every decision had to be perfect in order to have value. But now, as she walked through the rain, she could feel the weight of that expectation slowly lifting. The message in the wallet had reminded her that it was okay to make mistakes, to learn from them, and to move forward without feeling like a failure. She didn't need to carry the burden of her past forever. As the rain continued to pour, Emily found herself slowing her pace. The world around her felt different now, calmer, quieter, even as the storm raged on. It was as though the rain had cleansed more than just the streets. It had washed away the heaviness she had been carrying in her heart. She was beginning to understand that healing didn't have to happen all at once, and that it was okay to take her time. She didn't have to have all the answers right now, and it was okay to let herself breathe. She found herself smiling for the first time in days, a small, quiet smile, but one that felt genuine. It wasn't a smile of happiness yet. It was more of a smile of acceptance. Acceptance that she didn't need to rush her healing process, acceptance that she didn't need to have it all figured out today. And most importantly, acceptance that it was okay to let go of the past and trust that the future would unfold in its own time. The more Emily walked, the more she felt a sense of calm settle over her. The broken pieces of her heart didn't need to define her. There was still so much life left to live and so many possibilities yet to unfold. As she glanced around, the world around her seemed to open up with new potential. It was as though a door had been cracked open in her mind, and the light from the other side was slowly seeping in. In that moment, Emily realized that this rainy walk, this seemingly random encounter with the lost wallet, had given her something far more valuable than she could have imagined. It had given her the permission to reconnect with herself, to forgive herself for the mistakes she had made, and to start looking forward to the future, instead of clinging to the past. And as the rain began to slow, Emily felt something shift inside her, something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. As Emily continued walking through the streets, the rain had gradually lightened to a drizzle. The weight of the wallet in her hand had lost its heaviness. It no longer felt like a symbol of fate or some mysterious message. Instead, it had become a reminder of the shift inside her, the quiet realization that she was capable of change, capable of letting go of the things that had kept her tethered to the past for so long. The paper tucked inside it with its simple yet powerful words had sparked something in her, something she hadn't felt in a long time, the courage to face the future without fear. The path ahead still seemed uncertain, and the future remained unclear. But for the first time, Emily was no longer paralyzed by the unknown. The suffocating anxiety that had once gripped her heart was starting to loosen its hold. It wasn't that she had all the answers or that the pain had disappeared. It was still there lurking beneath the surface, but she realized that she didn't have to let it control her anymore. She didn't have to let the heartbreak define her or hold her back from moving forward. Emily had spent so much time wrapped up in the story of what had gone wrong, what had failed in her relationship, that she had forgotten the one truth that mattered. She was still here, still standing, and still capable of rebuilding. She had lived her life thinking she needed someone else to complete her, that her worth was tied to the love of another person. But the truth was that her worth had never been in someone else's hands. It had always been hers, to define hers, to reclaim. As she passed through the familiar streets, her mind began to shift from the past to the present. She thought about the things she wanted to do for herself, the goals she had put on hold for far too long. There was a world beyond the pain, beyond the remnants of her broken relationship. A world filled with opportunities to rediscover herself, to build the life she had always wanted. And for the first time in a long while, she felt ready to take that first step toward it. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her back to reality. It was a message from her best friend Rachel, someone who had supported her through the toughest moments of her life. The message was simple, a small check-in. "How are you doing?" For a moment, Emily just stood there in the rain, reading the message, feeling the warmth of the friendship she still had. Her finger hovered over the screen as she typed her response. She thought about the person she had been before the breakup, the person who had poured all of her energy into a relationship that, in hindsight, wasn't right for her. She thought about the ways she had neglected her own needs, her own dreams in favor of someone else's. The truth was, she had lost herself in trying to make everything perfect. Now it was time to find her way back. She typed a quick reply, "I'm okay. Actually, I think I'm starting to figure things out." She smiled as she hit send, realizing just how far she had come in the span of a few hours. It wasn't just about moving on from the breakup. It was about moving on from the version of herself. She had outgrown the version that had been defined by others' expectations, by past mistakes. By fear, the message in the wallet had given her permission to start fresh, to give herself the space to heal without rushing the process. She had a lifetime ahead of her, and it was time to stop letting the past dictate her future. As she walked through the now empty streets, the drizzle fading into a light mist, Emily felt a sense of peace settle in her chest. She had made a choice to stop living in the shadow of her heartbreak, a choice to embrace the unknown with open arms. It wasn't going to be easy, and there would be moments of doubt along the way, but she was ready to face them. For the first time in months, she felt a flicker of hope, a hope that perhaps, just perhaps, the best chapters of her life were still to come. She had no idea what the future held, but for the first time, she was excited to find out. The rain had stopped completely now, and the streets were slowly beginning to dry. The clouds that had covered the sky for hours were starting to break, allowing the first hints of sunlight to filter through. Emily stood on the sidewalk, her hand still clutching the wallet, feeling an odd sense of calm wash over her. She had no idea what to do with it, whether she should try to find its owner or simply leave it in a lost and found. But that didn't matter right now. What mattered was that in the process of finding this wallet, she had also found herself. It felt almost surreal standing there in the silence of the street, reflecting on the journey she had been on in just one evening. The pain, the confusion, the heartache, everything seemed to have been washed away, not in an instant, but slowly, piece by piece. The discovery of the wallet had triggered something deep inside her, a reminder that she was not defined by her past or her circumstances. She was more than the sum of her mistakes, her relationships, her losses. Emily's thoughts turned to her future, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel so uncertain. She knew she didn't have all the answers and that life wasn't going to be a smooth ride. But what she did know was that she was no longer afraid to face it. She had spent so much time hiding from her emotions, trying to avoid the pain, thinking that if she just kept running, things would get better. But now she realized that running away only kept her stuck in place, circling the same fears, the same doubts. Now Emily was ready to face the future with an open heart, ready to embrace whatever came her way. She thought about all the things she had put off: her career, her passions, the trips she dreamed of taking, the friendships she had neglected. She had so much to look forward to, so much to explore, and the possibilities felt endless. There was a part of her that felt ready to rebuild, to step into a life that was truly her own, free from the shadows of the past. But as she turned to leave, something stopped her. She glanced down at the wallet again, the worn edges of it reminding her of the small message she had read earlier. Don't be afraid to let go of the past. She smiled softly, knowing that this moment, this rainy night, was part of her own letting go. The wallet was a symbol of that, a symbol of how something seemingly insignificant had changed everything for her. She didn't know whether she would ever find out who it belonged to or if it would be a mystery forever. But she did know that it had served its purpose. It had reminded her that it was okay to move on, that there was more to life than holding on to the things that weighed her down. As Emily continued her walk, the weight of the wallet now seemed lighter in her hand, almost like it was no longer hers to carry. She didn't need the wallet to define her, nor did she need any specific resolution to feel whole. It wasn't about finding closure. It was about finding herself in the midst of the uncertainty. She had let go not just of the past, but also of the need for everything to be neatly wrapped up. Life, she realized, didn't always have clear endings or answers. Sometimes the beauty of life was in the mess and the open-ended journey that stretched out ahead of her. And so, with the rain now behind her and the promise of a new day ahead, Emily walked forward, each step a little lighter than the last. She didn't know where her path would lead, but for the first time in a long while, she was excited to find out the future was uncertain, but that was okay. She had learned to trust that no matter what came her way, she would be able to handle it. She was ready for whatever life had in store. She was ready to begin again,